Should have tested this before. I don't know why I didn't. All right. So I have audio. I think it sounds fine. I can't tell. Okay. Now I need to get. Okay, this should be good. Just check this in all places. Okay. And let's check YouTube because I am try streaming. Let's go to my profile. Yeah, it's all working. Okay, very cool. Okay.
yeah, nothing was built to do this. I can say that much for a fact. Yeah, I think there's like 7 cross cables involved in this at this point, and a lav mic, and a special capture card that I bought specifically for this, and an OBS cross monitor, all allowing this to work with decent audio on all ends.
Did QuickTime not let you do decent audio recording?
QuickTime?
Probably not.
So the thing about the QuickTime options, there's a lot of things with the QuickTime options, but the big problem, I just realized I don't have the view of this on, that's going to help. Sorry about that. But yeah, the problem with the QuickTime thing is all of the capture utilities on iOS and all of the capture APIs on iOS are actually specific to, how do I put it? They don't allow for call capture when you're using the call audio path. So if you're on a phone call, you can't screen record that, and if you're on a phone call in QuickTime, you can't audio record that. It's like a protected audio pipe, so the only way to get that is through the 3.5.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
There is the option of using a Bluetooth receiver. Honestly, I'm beginning to think that might be the cheaper path and the one I recommend in the future. But yeah, you gotta pick. Also, the light mode on this is killing me. I'm going to dark mode this quick. Yo, Jacob, what's good? Yo, if you're talking, we can't hear you. You're muted.
The classic.
The join and mute. Yeah. Everyone's favorite.
This is so brutal. I'm so sorry. I don't even know if anybody's watching, but this audio is going to be so fucking brutal. I'm so sorry.
Whenever I run these, I have to run an earlier one for him in the future.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, I'm having to do with a lot of guests as well.
Yeah, Jacob, how you doing, man?
Living the dream.
Good stuff. Good to hear. Good to hear. Anything fun out of the recent Cloudflare releases and announcements that has you particularly jazzed?
Yeah, I mean, like, the full stack Cloudflare pages is a big deal. If anybody hasn't read up on the more recent blogs, I suggest going out and checking those out. You can imagine, like, a lot of the like trying to like connect things and pieces together and stuff to be able to use Cloudflare pages before was like trying to wire up, like, okay, I want to use workers with Cloudflare pages, but why isn't it just like built into Cloudflare pages? You know, they kind of just solved that. They just were like, yeah, that's fair, that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, I did see, like, in the backend stuff in particular, there were some cool things going on. I am curious, like, deployment-wise, how that stuff works. Like, on Vercel, there's a very clear distinction where if you deploy via the pages directory, it is on Lambda.
Because I have, like, a new audience, I guess, because I haven't done any Twitch stuff in a little bit. So this is, like, Wednesday Web Dev Spaces. So for those who don't follow me, or Theo, basically, Wednesday Web Dev Spaces is a little get-together that Theo, who's an ex-Twitch engineer, put together, and we just talk about a bunch of stuff. So we'll talk about, like, news of the week, we'll talk about just hot takes. Theo's got a lot of hot takes, so does Jacob. It's fun. You can find the Spaces link. I've retweeted it somewhere, so go check out my profile. I can't put it on the screen, I'm sorry, and the audio is going to be very bad. I'm so sorry about that. It just is what it is. I can't fix it right now. There's too much weird streaming stuff I have to do. And then I guess an introduction for me, as my profile says, I do software testing. That's going to change a little bit. I'm going to get more into web dev stuff because that's a lot of fun, and that's what I've been doing a lot recently. But my name is Christian Lasniol, so day job I do software testing. After work I do a bunch of different development stuff. Between, like, developing, I guess, like a web service with Flutter right now is one of my side projects. I'm doing this React library thing. That's another project. I'm working on a web application that does like physics models. I do a bunch of like development stuff, just in general. And I play around with technology, and I have fun doing it. And yes, this will be a little bit of fun because I'm going to, I think, start streaming more since I got my new laptop, and it's not going to be laggy or buggy. And then I think I'm going to change up some of my Twitter stuff so I can tweet a lot more because I enjoy the Twitter community in general. So yeah, that's, I guess, a little intro about me. I'm sorry again for the audio. It's just going to be bad. It's just going to be really, really bad.
Fire for not talking about a thing I'm excited about for a while, and now that I've gotten that one over with, everything feels pretty trivial.
Alrighty.
Yeah, that would be painful.
In the meantime, I've got like my iPad, and you can see like all the tasks that we're going to do for this.
I'm greatly anticipating the day it happened, or it finally came out, so you could just watch everybody playing through this thing, and yeah, it was really cool. I have a very special relationship with Outer Wilds for a lot of reasons, but there's nothing quite like being the first person to make the DLC for your favorite game.
So we're building out, as you can see, like a React image library. So I introduced the project too. So what we're going to do today, at least, is we're going to like get the a button set up to be able to upload images, JPEGs and PNG, and then we're going to create like a worker either in Cloudflare or AWS to store that image in S3 or R2. R2 is Cloudflare's image stuff. And then I'm going to figure out how to turn that into a library because I have no idea how to do that. As always, if you have any questions or anything like that, this is beginner friendly. You can comment on Twitter. That's probably the worst way. The best way is to like go on to Twitch and put in like something in the chat, or go on to YouTube if you have a YouTube account.
Directory follows the proper structure. Pages will identify and deploy your functions to our network with your site. So, and then you get to define your bindings, right? So you can define your bindings for KV namespaces, durable objects. Eventually R2 will be coming out pretty soon. Environment variables. The another thing that just came out recently that's gonna kind of be a huge deal when it comes to Cloudflare services, and with like the Cloudflare WebSockets that James Snell has brought up a couple times, is going to be what they're calling DOG, which is just a funny acronym, but it stands for the Durable Object Groups. And so that's going to be a huge deal because you could think of your durable objects groups as essentially like a cross system of workers, so your services.
Okay, so I'm going to add React to this
like state
quickly. So, there's like a few that you can do, but since I don't want to make this really complicated, I'm just going to add React as
yeah, so I don't know if anybody knows what durable objects
are. Tags, it's easier to do.
It's,
I think.
You think it's kind of like a very high level. You can think of it as kind of like a local storage, except like on the edge, right? So it's just like a global, like when I say global, I mean like the actual world local storage. Slightly disingenuous for how powerful it is and how much possible use cases it has, but like the durable object groups in combination with something like, say, like the Cloudflare worker services and WebSockets is going to make it so like you can create similar like infrastructure and architecture that you have in like these like monolithic old school systems.
Actually,
more traditional systems.
Since I've been PM, so I could probably
except build it on the edge.
I am sure that everybody who's here is listening, but anybody who's watching on the stream is not, because there's currently a cat on my shoulders headbutting me. If you're not getting the visual along with the space, I highly recommend it. Twitch.tv/Theo definitely adds to the space. This is a very cute cat. But yeah, I what's interesting here with the Cloudflare stuff,
I don't have a cat. I'm sorry.
It seems like a lot of the path that they're taking is leaning in on the things that make Cloudflare unique, but also the things that make Cloudflare proprietary in a way. where it almost feels like this is a necessary step because of how painful it is to integrate things like worker KV and durable objects into an existing Next.js deployment. You're basically stubbing out a whole separate ecosystem to do that. It seems like they're letting you deploy so you have more immediate access to those services in your deployed architecture and infrastructure for your service rather than having to separate those two as much as Cloudflare kind of enforces right now.
Okay. This is formatting weird. I'll fix that later.
Yeah, I mean, the idea in the long run will be that you can choose to take these pieces and use them separately, or you could choose to just go all in on the Cloudflare infrastructure and just leverage, basically the whole like global.
So we're gonna add our container.
Power and infrastructure that has been at this point proven. I don't know if anybody saw on the news, but Cloudflare hit another milestone by absorbing almost effortlessly a like 3 terabyte per second DDoS botnet. So that was just like another like proof of concept of how ridiculous the infrastructure is being built.
You sure that was a botnet? It wasn't just a new cryptocurrency being minted?
I mean,
it was a joke.
Is there a difference?
Yeah. Just joking that there is no difference between the recent crypto madness and a DDoS attack, except the crypto madness makes slightly more money.
True.
Somehow. Sorry, this cat is being extremely needy. Please don't bite my chin. Please don't bite my chin, bud. Ow! Oh. Yeah, this... Normally he's not this needy. I think it's because I've been stationary for more than 15 minutes, which never happens. Normally I'm like writing a little bit of code and then walking around and then writing a bit more and then walking around a bunch. But right now I'm just sitting here to do the space and the stream. So he's like, oh, dad. Isn't that right, bud? Okay. Announcements. What else was there? Oh, the reapplication stuff. We haven't talked about that at all. And I'm actually running into a bit of routing hell right now with our Next.js app. So we're in the process of redoing the settings page for Round and making it a much deeper, like embedded experience with layers of navigation. So there will be like a base settings, account settings, other settings, device settings, and we want to have those be like sub routes within the core route. So settings / account settings / other settings / devices. But that means we now have to have entirely different
render
page files
takes an element and container.
For each of those different pages. There are a couple things in Next.js to get around this, but generally speaking, it is one of the weaknesses of the page routing pattern. It is not strong for like sub-routes with partial elements staying mounted. So if I wanted to keep like the settings left nav but change the main page content when you go to specific sub-routes,
I'm using
Next.js does not help you there. And as such, whenever I run into these problems, the grass looks a little bit greener on the other side, and that's where something like React Vocation sets in. It's a new React-based routing system that is focused entirely on client-side routing. So if you're going to use this so if you want to ship the best HTML down to your user from the server, this is useless to you. If you have an internal like page for like settings or dashboard management or like an admin panel, and you want to have really complex routes with state included in the URL bar, something like this would make a ton of sense. And I'm genuinely really excited for it. I'm going to try and isolate like a route or two in my code base to use React Vocation on that aren't user facing. They're just for internal stuff, just to see how strong the pattern and paradigm works there, especially when combined with Next.js's page routing or file-based routing systems. There needs to be a balance here, but I'm still looking into it.
Yeah, this is awesome because this like the problem you're talking about for like deeply nested, like deep links basically is what a lot of people call them. I mean, that's like one of the super strong suits for the React Vocation, and where like the biggest pain points are in like most of the routers that I've dealt with so far. So I'm super interested to see what the this little hybrid test situation comes up with, you know?
Is that doing? Oh, it's TypeScript. Okay.
I think almost all apps have some needs in both sides. Everybody needs some amount of SEO, and everybody needs some amount of dynamic routing at scale. I find I need one or the other much more, so picking one to buy into harder usually makes sense. But then the other one becomes an edge case, and that edge case can get rough. And like the get layout pattern in Next.js, I haven't even looked at it before today, and I'm still unsure if I actually want to go with it or not. And yeah, just stuff like that.
Okay, now I need to create a
component. For me personally, I've only ever worked on internal applications or admin tools, and so like SEO was like not even an afterthought; it was an unnecessary thought. And so like I've always just felt the pain of like, why do I not have these features? Why do all these routers have these other features that are just completely useless to me? And it's like, I'm on the complete other spectrum, right? The complete other side of that spectrum. And so Tanner's React location is like
so all I'm doing here is I'm just creating an image upload component in JSX. If you don't know what JSX is, it's just like a markup language that combines like HTML and JavaScript. So it's like JavaScript with markup on top of it. And so it allows you to like write more
a static
HTML-like code within JavaScript that makes it easier to put in React. So this is just like a regular ES6 function. If you haven't seen like JavaScript functions before,
want to have mainlined to make more dynamic stuff like what you're doing more accessible. But
these two things, the top and the bottom, are essentially the same.
Every CORS issue is now a
this
big
is just the old way of writing it. This is a newer way of writing it. I like writing it like this a little bit more because it just makes a little bit more sense.
Weird CSS bug.
Also, with TypeScript, it's helpful because you can add your return values and stuff like that.
I don't know if you
we'll
are
export
aware
this
of like
function
something
out
that
so that
Google
other
pushed
files
like kind of
can
hard and kind of silently.
Find it.
But there's a new thing out there
So
called
you do export default.
and Corp.
And then in this index right here,
So
add
COEP and CORP.
image.
And basically imagine like CORS except like way more.
Let's create
way more painful.
right?
Joy.
And yeah, and like my brother actually ran into this recently when he was trying to do some like he had access to an S3 bucket. The S3 bucket, he didn't have access to the configurations. He only had access like as in like he was authorized to get stuff out of it. And he was trying to pull it into his server. First, he was trying to pull it directly into his front end, and it would just throw a CORP error. And then he was trying to pull it directly into his server and then send it to the front end to deal with that. And the crazy part is like you can't even change the headers to properly like even if you change the headers, there's like something they send with the package that just like you can't fix the corp error with just changing the headers like you could with CORS back in the day.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, but the problem goes further than this with CORS, in my opinion, where it's, yes, these things
JSX elements in here.
The thing that sucks harder, how do I put this?
React element,
or the hard. With CORS, more often than not, the only way to fix it is to host it. Where if like another service, like you're using the Spotify API or the YouTube API, and it doesn't let you fetch from a different domain, you have to do it from a server.
Record element takes in.
Now you're pulling up a service, and if you've built an entirely client routing app using like Create React App or Vite, and you're not doing a deployment where it's easy to just stub up a quick one file service that's just a function that fetches this external thing and gives it to you. That needs to be as easy as possible because developers need to be able to unlock themselves. And CORS is a very dumb, constant blocker that I don't want my developers getting blocked by.
Okay.
And that's why I think fully client-side solutions can be painful, or even medium long-term. Because like if I had you as the front-end engineer building this internal endpoint, and you need to do a health, like we decide we want to have a health check in one of these dashboard pages where previously just shows all the things. Now we want to have it check the health of these services, but the health endpoint is for a specific like page that's also an API, and we can't hit it through the browser. now you're fucked.
Oh.
And this is a very common power flow I've seen where you're the client-side engineer building the web app, a very dynamic web app. We just need this one additional endpoint to be hit, but we can't hit it on the front end. Now we need a back-end engineer allocated as well to go stand this up in the back end, add it to our API so we can consume it. They get it wrong the first time, there's another loop. Now we're talking weeks instead of minutes. Whereas in a server-side system like Next.js, or even like a basic server component that you could quickly just fetch this in a hook and return that HTML instead, we need a way to get around these types of quick problems, and a fully client-side solution does not provide that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't disagree. All I was saying was that Chrome made it harder by adding more of these policies, cross-ordered policies. So, like the core one is for resources, and then there's another one, the co-op one is embedder policy, and it's basically just think like cores except for.
I don't think that'll fix this.
Like things like. Yeah, words are hard. Damn it.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't want to know anything more about any weird Google web policies. I know too much already. Less is better.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. No, I mean, this is how recent this was. It was 2018.
Yeah, sounds about right. Google loves introducing new standards that are supposedly better, but are just newer and often even worse. And yeah.
And then, like, right under everybody's nose, like, is like, they don't tell anybody.
Fun fact. Did you know that Cores actually isn't supported on WebSocket at all?
Let's see. Hold on. I'm trying to enable JavaScript here.
Really? You can do some really fun things with this. Discord, when it runs on your computer, actually outputs a local WebSocket that you can connect to from your browser.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a browser, ws://127.0.0.1, and you can connect there from a website. I have some security risk, but yeah, it exists.
I have some ideas already for like the sockets for the Cloudflare workers plus the connectors for Prisma and the PlanetScale. Like, I have a couple ideas here. Most of it has to do with, like, how can I put PlanetScale on the edge and Prisma on the edge and just, like, see what I can do with that.
The problem with that's going to be most of the Prisma connectors aren't actually running in JS. They're running in Rust. So Prisma actually ships in the NPM bundle.
I think I can actually know these compiler errors because I'm not doing my compilation through TypeScript.
We have a workers RS.
Rust.
Is that Rust at the edge?
So, which is Babel, I think.
It's workers running Rust. So yeah.
Are all workers edge workers?
Are all workers edge? Yes.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, I didn't know that the Rust workers could run at the edge. Theoretically, that would be usable. The problem there would be that the Rust binaries that it ships are like, from what I've heard, like comically massive in the like tens, if not hundreds of megabytes.
I'm just gonna trust that the workers team that collaborated with Prisma knew what they were doing, and I'm just gonna piggyback off that.
Yeah, aren't they doing data proxy though?
Yeah, they are using data proxy. That's correct.
Yeah, that's entirely different. So the data proxy doesn't do. What I was thinking here is that you were trying to do some SQL at the edge of something.
I don't have Tract installed. That's my problem.
Yeah, that would be impossible. As far as I understand right now, like the methods to connect and have a good, even something resembling a good experience with SQL is going to break that 1 megabyte edge binary limit quick.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, interesting though.
I'm going to try to pay attention to both these things, but it's difficult.
My concern with a lot of the things I'm seeing at the edge is how quickly a lot
of
them
all this stuff down.
benefit
I think this should all render properly.
So if I was connecting to the Prisma data proxy at the edge is now connecting to the Prisma API, which is now connecting to my database, which then sends something back to the Prisma API, which sends something back to the edge, which then resolves that initial connection. it is a much harder sell for me to believe that is significantly better than if you just hit my API directly, which is my Vercel Lambda function, which goes directly to the DB and back. It's one less connection. Yes, it's not at the edge, so I don't have the ability to escape and give you an immediate response quite as fast. But if I need to do a round trip before I can do that response, putting it at the edge is just adding an additional back and forth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. My response to that is, I'm gonna mess around with this and get back to you.
It was
anyway.
a dev dependency.
That's a very good answer. I just want to play with and understand the benefits of this before I consider using it, because right now what I'm seeing is cool integrations. I'm not seeing any cool wins for my developers or for my users at this moment. The edge stuff is cool with Prisma, but Prisma on the edge just means a third layer. It doesn't mean better performance or wins for my users right now. So like here's an example of the way I plan to use the middleware in Next.js. I use NextAuth, and we do a bunch of like authentication stuff with the database and the NextAuth provider and OAuth. We check and validate that on requests pretty regularly, just when you do a basic web request. And right now, we determine if you get the homepage or the marketing page by whether or not you're signed in with a valid token. Which means on any request of the website, you are calling our Lambda function. You are submitting your cookie when you call that. We are validating the cookie against the database, determining yes or no is this a valid session, and then returning
I'm trying to
the
figure
right
out why
HTML,
this is not compiling.
which is uncached HTML as a result.
I'm trying to get it.
What I plan to do when I move us to Next 12 soon is check when we get the request if it has an authentication token or not. If it does not have an authentication token, immediate escape, return some cached HTML, kill the rest. Don't do anything else from there. That's when the edge is beneficial, when you can early escape and return something that's already cached immediately. If there is a token, go through the traditional flow, and if the traditional flow realizes the token's invalid, force invalidate, force reload, get the cached HTML the next run. But that general flow of middleware as a quick escape at the edge is when that benefits.
Yeah.
Not when you're doing data transformations and SQL calls and API calls at the edge. That will never be faster than the user doing them themselves.
Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna have to experiment with like the potential implementations, because let's be honest, most likely these integrations were created because it's like A, they're cool, B, we like the tooling. Like a lot of people in workers also like Prisma. Especially the dev advocates. So, I mean, that's part of it. And like the other funny thing is like the workers team itself has this like funny philosophy of let's innovate and create cool things in the team and then push it out to the community and see what crazy shit they make. So I'm super stoked on just like this mindset of let's make stuff, and if really cool things come out of that from the Cloudflare workers,
added main
great.
Here.
If really cool things comes out of the community instead, even better. If nothing comes out of this,
dev server. I don't
we can always deprecate, right? We can always roll back,
So yeah, I guess my concern here is it almost feels like Prisma for the sake of it in a way, where it's like you guys like Prisma so much and it's so hot a topic right now that you want to get in, so you're putting it in.
Let's see.
But the way it's put in, I don't see the immediate benefit beyond it being a really compelling ad for the Prisma data proxy.
Sure.
It is a very compelling ad for Prisma data proxy. But
I mean, it comes back to like we don't see the immediate benefit, but who knows who will. Right, there might be that one person that's just like, hey, I found this like crazy implementation for this, and it's just gonna blow everybody's minds, or nobody does, and it just doesn't happen.
Interesting. I actually want to dive in on this topic now. The idea of, as like a creator of tools, building tools in a way where your creators can do things you don't have in mind. I don't necessarily believe the path there is by doing specific integrations. I actually believe firmly the opposite. The path there is abstracting away the layers in which those integrations are made so they can be created by independents themselves. So an example of this, like at T3 with Round, our video call app, was the need to have a good experience embedding in OBS. When we first started, we made the assumption that the majority of creators would be happiest just signing into the site, quickly screen capturing that and throwing it in OBS. But we found a handful of customers had very specific needs. Some wanted to integrate it into mobile apps and onto like mobile devices just to play back one video feed. Others wanted to put it in OBS or XSplit or these other programs. And we quickly started investing in integrations for each of these specific platforms before we realized that we were, to an extent, solving the same problem in multiple places, but more so the philosophical idea of what if I just want this video feed somewhere else became the core of what we were solving. And I, instead of building those integrations, challenged us to take the step back and think, okay, how can we build this differently? So instead of building 5 integrations that do one thing for one customer, we build one platform and one solution that can be applied to all of those things, as well as the things we can't think of right now. That is when you see that level of experimentation. Can somebody theoretically go use this Prisma adapter and make something kind of cool? Maybe, but the opportunity there is much, much smaller than the comparison in something like if proper Node.js support on that edge would allow for them to build their own Prisma proxy layer, or for me to go build a whole separate thing that calls Supabase or PlanetScale directly, maybe. But the introduction of standards and the abstraction of integration layers, that is where the cool experimentation comes, in my opinion.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, I gotta go, so we should talk about this later. And then 2, JS standards are being implemented, and it's only happening faster. Everybody should be super stoked about that, especially Theo, since he has not shut up about it since I've met him. So, hey, it's happening. James Snell is on top of it, and it's awesome. So
excited.
The WebSocket, the WebSocket is the sockets thing is next.
I can run the
and like that's gonna be like a huge deal as well. You're gonna be able to do crazy shit like connecting your workers together.
That'll be fun. Well,
I'll show you guys the actual file.
Anybody else want to hop up? Feel free. We got plenty of space up here now, especially with Christian gone. I see a bunch of regulars. We got Brock, Jeff, Josh, Renee, Ryan. Obviously, Christian's up here too. How you doing, man?
Good. Not doing too much.
Any more luck with the streaming stuff on your end?
Yeah, it's the audio's pretty bad, but it's all right because it's coming from like my bad phone speakers going. Yeah, it's just all weird, but it's all good. I'm excited about some of the worker stuff. I saw the Wrangler announcement that started getting me thinking about Cloudflare workers, specifically for like the React thing that I'm doing, because I think it's just an easy way to get images to S3 or R2, R2 especially. But I'll have to look into it.
But also excited to see where it goes. Anything supporting web standards is a good thing.
Yeah.
You're getting a ton of echo from you, Christian.
Oh, really? Are you watching my stream, or because it shouldn't be echoing anywhere?
Just making dinner. Figured I'd stop in for a little bit, say hey.
God, that is really bad. I'm muting you for a sec, Christian. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, you're not going out.
I think. Let's see. Hold on.
Anyways, we were having a fun conversation. I was almost considering doing a live stream of what you were talking about in the near future. Anyways, for just to quickly clue in the audience, Brock's brother was talking about wanting to build Twitch.
Oh. I wonder.
Shell inside of OBS that you hand a URL and it then puts that in OBS. You can make it a localhost URL, you can make it a server, a web service, whatever the hell you want. As long as it returns HTML, it can be rendered on top of your stream.
Let's check a few things. Hold Oh, and I love how my phone is starting to lag too.
You can just use React,
which I find very funny.
You like to use, embed it into OBS directly, and you're good to go. So he was asking, like, how do you get started there? So the same way you do with any other web stuff. Just go build a website, but instead of opening it in Chrome, open it in OBS.
Okay, so that's not playing. My Twitter app on Mac is not open.
A little bit of context. He is a biomechanic.
Okay, let me just leave the space and come back. Oh, they finally added an option where I can join as a speaker. Fun. Well, maybe not, I guess. Just join as a listener.
It's not too hard. I know a handful of devs who have done that exactly. It's, I find the right way to put it. You just kind of got to start. It's one of those things where once you're doing it, it becomes much clearer what.
Oh, now my phone's gonna lag, and then I'll become a speaker. There we go. Okay. Now I gotta figure out, man, how do I get...
Notice a handful of
Oh. I'm just gonna lag out, I guess. Okay. I just need to figure out how to get this. I think, so I've imported this here. This is my dist. Oh, it's being exported to something else, isn't it? No. I wonder if when I was watching the file, it was being exported to something different.
We did, probably...
Because this should export to main, and then when I open the file... I promise this is going to be, this stream setup will be a little bit better next time. I'll show you like all my screens and whatnot.
Like, none of the web technologies are just was there.
Did I put... Oh yeah, that would help. Just a little bit, you know.
Picture anything without it, but
okay, I really have to think about this because this has been a very long time.
Professional experience was in MATLAB also. Like my first job in biomed was they used MATLAB. So it's
okay.
Nope, get away from me and get out of my apartment and never open this computer.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna restart this Spaces app because it keeps lagging. I'll try to do this one more time.
Sort of thing that that you would bring it in there. So you basically have to send somebody your MATLAB code, and then they would run it on their version on their MATLAB. It was
okay,
one-based, which was annoying. That was it. But there was some stuff that transferred over, like
I'm sure that like there's a lot of things that it uses that are
actually,
core enough
why am I doing
concepts
this? Can't I just
lessons from it? So generally speaking, MATLAB is like a bad software, bad ecosystem, terrible language, and just rough overall experience. Right? I was even like relatively anti C++ for similar reasons. It's just so much additional work, especially for people who are learning and just trying to get shit done.
Okay, makes sense.
MATLAB is the enemy. Somebody in the chat actually just said they dropped out of CompSci to work in web stuff, which is hilarious and very on point. I don't think any of these programs do a good job of teaching how you actually are going to program in the real world. I'd say a lot of the boot camps are better at that. But generally speaking, to go back to what we were talking about before, the best way to learn is to just have something you want to do and fucking do it. Don't let, like, the idea of having to go to school or go to a program to learn this stuff get in your way. The analogy I always compare
sure
to
I'm importing the
If
correct
you want to learn a skateboard trick, you don't. And if you want to learn how to skateboard, you don't do it by sitting in class for 8 hours a day, reading books and watching videos about how skateboards work. You do it by grabbing a skateboard, going outside, hitting the ground.
File that I need.
I firmly believe that's the best way to learn how to code.
This file does not look
fucking do it.
like anything, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, MATLAB is just awful.
Oh no, it's got its
that was so. Okay. My brother's at UNL. University of Lincoln, Nebraska, and their intro to comp sci, like for engineers, was MATLAB. So you'd be like texting me, "Hey, can you like help me with this?" And it's just bad. Arrays start at 1, if that's any indication of how bad it is.
Oh wow.
Like the best.
For those who don't know, arrays always start at 0 for most programming languages. They're always 0 indexed.
The cool things that
Absolutely agree. Yo, Jay.
I realize what's wrong with Spaces and why it keeps lagging. It's using like my cell phone's reception, but it keeps dropping.
And
that works
at the school
well.
that I went to, they taught VB.net, or just VB. Sorry, VB as the first programming language that they learned, where they literally like opened up Microsoft Word, and that was how like they got into their
Do I need to
code
put the
editor.
script in the body, or can I keep it in the head? I always forget.
Now my friend refuses to
Actually,
code.
Might be because
he was so turned off by like what his connotation with programming is, and so
I can put
schools do such a disservice to engineers in introducing them to programming.
Wait, you guys don't use Word? What editor do you guys use?
End of the page.
I mean, I use some other Microsoft product.
So now I gotta rebuild it.
VB is bad. Racket's imaginary. MATLAB's mean and terrible. Prolog has some fun concepts, but I'm genuinely sad with how some of these things are taught. I helped with my high school's curriculum a bit after I graduated. I just gave the teachers some assistance, and I'm proud to say that my high school's computer science curriculum is better than my university's, genuinely. And it's good to have that kind of confidence that at least people coming from my high school know what programming actually is, roughly what it looks like, so they can make good decisions themselves. And most of them are getting jobs their freshman year of college because they know what's going on, and everybody else doesn't because they went to school to learn how to code, not to be told they already know. And I'm a big fan of proving that you know what you're doing by proving that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I kind of feel college students are getting they're just getting shortchanged so hard. It's actually insane. I have a person that I talk to, and I'm like, hey, what are you going to college for? And they're like, comp sci, and I'm like, I kind of almost want to be like, why? And I'm like, what are you learning? They're like, oh, we're learning Java, and I'm learning basic Java stuff, and it's like, oh, what job do you want? I'd like to work at I don't know, I'd like to build websites. And I'm just that's a very roundabout way of learning how to build websites. I don't know. I feel there's college is kind of useful. I wanted to go to become a pilot, right? A long time ago. I mean a long time, a year ago or something like that. But I think it's useful. You have to do ground school for a little bit, but the best way to do ground school when you're a pilot is to do it for a day. Learn all the basics, and then go flying. Because if you do ground school for 2 weeks, it just becomes brutal and very, very, very fucking boring, and then you just don't absorb anything. But when you actually go flying, and then you're oh, I understand why I need to understand wind. Because when I take off and the plane starts drifting, oh, this is actually useful. And now I can learn about all these concepts about wind and how to check the weather and all that stuff. And you actually start applying it a lot more. But I feel as a college student, you're going to sit there for 2 years, and maybe if you get really lucky, you'll start actually applying like what you learn. And I feel like that's just like how college has always been done, because every other subject you might need 2 years of learning to actually like get to a point where you can start doing stuff. Like I think you probably need 2 years of chemistry before you can actually start applying it, but I don't know. Hopefully, I don't know. It really should change, but I doubt it will for a long
There's
time.
a couple points there I want to dive in on. 1 second, though. Somebody redeemed the channel point reward for finding a cat, so I have to show a cat. 1 second.
Okay.
I want to see. Wait a minute. I gotta go on Twitch now.
Yeah, if you're not already watching on Twitch, you're missing on a lot of good cat action.
Mm. If you're watching me on Twitch, you're just missing my face. But I'd recommend the cat. It's probably a little bit more entertaining. Twitch.tv/Theo. He's also ads enabled though, which is unfortunate. I don't know if they're enabled just for like every Twitch stream at this point.
I'm an affiliate, so I don't know if I can disable it anymore, sadly. Yeah. I won't tell anybody if you use an ad block on me.
If you run like a 30-second stream or whatever before the or 30-second ad, like right now, you can disable pre-rolls, but otherwise it like users have to watch
Actually, you know what? That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So anybody who's watching right now on Twitch, I'm going to run an ad. We're going to intentionally not talk about anything interesting for 30 seconds, except for this one last thing. If you're not already subscribed, feel free to use a Twitch Prime subscription, or just throw in your real money if you dare to do that. And I will happily spend all of that on getting treats for the boys, and you don't have to deal with ads anymore. So yeah, Twitch Primes. Spend those, guys. Gonna run the ad now.
I will gladly give my money for cats.
That is the correct answer. I should know how to run a 30-second ad. I built the dashboard. There we go.
You built a new dashboard?
On Twitch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, ModView was my main project. I led most of the dev there, and we just copy-pasted a bunch of the stuff from there over to the dashboard when we were redoing it for like the 5th time. So a decent chunk of dashboard is me. Almost all of the original deployment of ModView is, and a lot of Twitch Studio as well. When Twitch Studio got redone with all the moving shit around, like OBS style, like fully customizable UI, I led most of that.
Oh, that's very cool. A lot of people really hated it though at first, but I thought it was kind of useful to like customize it in a way.
Yeah.
But that's every product. Like everybody hates change, so.
The dashboard was a bit rushed, honestly. I think that we did a much better job with ModView. I wasn't involved with the dashboard until a year after the rewrite started. Thank you for the sub, Alejo. I really appreciate that, man. But yeah, I did not do the... How do I put it? Yeah, I did not get involved with the dashboard until pretty late after the rewrite. I helped them a bit just getting things out the door, but I didn't get to do the level of involvement I was hoping until way after. And even then, there was a long time until I could have the impact I wanted to there, and I don't feel like I managed to. It's one of the main reasons I left, was to build better creator tools, because I didn't feel like I could at Twitch. But yeah, I'm still super proud of ModView. It's definitely like the crown jewel of the work I did at Twitch. So if that's something that you're interested in, I can rant about it a lot more in approximately 2 months or so when my NDA's up. So that'll be fun.
I'll set an alarm for that, I guess.
Yeah. What was the thing I wanted to rant about before? It was something about like applied learning and learning on the job that you were discussing, actually.
Yeah, I said something about like you do ground school, and the best way to do ground school is for a day, and then actually go flying, because you'll remember a lot more. Yeah.
This is the failure-driven thing. This is like my big thing. In almost all other fields that are this high-paying and this technical, there's a very high cost of failure. If you design a bad building, you're fucked. If you pour the wrong chemicals together, you're fucked. The cost of experimentation and failure are very high in a lot of other fields. Even art, like
it's
if
so
you're
funny.
drawing,
I feel like I know
if you're making
React
a painting, the material cost there can be massive.
It's
getting started with
really
code
hilarious that I have to like
and the failures
still
are
figure out how to
free
do this
for a very long time. So
This
you're
is
not doing
good.
stupid stuff in AWS, and as such, it's really fun to fuck around, and that's what I think makes this field so special. You can get good by screwing up over and over, and there aren't very many things in life where you're paid to be wrong 90% of the time. Like, it's our job to fuck up so often that we know every way you can fuck up and plan around it and get ahead of it. That's what makes our job special. I think it's one of the coolest things that we can do. Yeah, my lord, thanks for swinging by. Sorry, Rock.
Oh, I just wanted to throw in, my fiance would like me to interject that not in nursing.
Yep. Nursing is very much a place where you cannot fuck up.
You
don't learn by failure.
I mean, you do learn something by failure, but it's that you need a new job.
Jesus.
Yeah, Jack, was good.
I was just going to talk about, like, kind of why I think, I have only experience with, like, how university learning works, but, like, why it's, like, the way that, like, we don't really learn how to do our job in university. And so I was a part of the curriculum committee at my school as, like, a student advisor. And so the two things that I learned of, like, why our education feels like it's lagging behind what industry is doing is, one, most of the professors, it's been a long time since they've been in industry, or if they ever made it to industry. So, you know, they kind of just teach to what they know. And then two, their incentive is, or, well, not their incentive, but, like, they are academics and they want you to become academics. That's kind of my experience is that they want you to learn the computer science theory rather than, you know, how to make a cool new API or something like that. And when I was fighting for more API, or, you know, like learning, like, what is a microservice, or learning how to build a web app or something like that, there's a lot of resistance to it. Finally won, though, so that was nice.
Yeah, I definitely saw that a lot in academia. I find that the people who stay in academia, just by the nature of it, are the ones who don't have the interest in building solutions for users. It's like a self-perpetuating system where the people who teach are the ones who don't like to build solutions for users. Therefore, the people who stay are the ones who don't like to build solutions for users. Therefore, the people who teach yada cycles infinitely. Most people who teach in university for programming stuff have not had any job-facing, like, users in software, and if they did, they left for academia because they hated the user-facing stuff so much.
Yeah, it was a very interesting experience to have like these curriculum discussions going back and forth of, like, you know, this is what me as a student who wants to you know, get job at company to, you know, make apps versus professor who wants, you know, to teach me, you know, like breadth first search or Dijkstra's algorithm, or, you know, or, you know, how to implement a database, or, you know, these kind of things. So
yeah, I also forgot to make a joke that I think Brock had to drop because we bullied him too hard.
I think also universities, to give them credit, have like a different job. Like, if you think about it, like, a university needs to be as broad as possible, because, like, you don't want to learn, okay, like, I'm gonna go to college for 4 years, learn how to be a web dev, and then, like, go look for a job in, like, I don't know, like Java, and then I can't get a Java job because, like, I didn't learn enough general stuff. And I think that's what universities are worried about. Because, like, if you really think about it, a degree is an insurance policy, right? Like, it's not... nowadays, and unless you're in, like, certain fields, it's not much more than that. Especially in comp sci, it's just an insurance, like, thing. It's like, if I have one of these things, I'm just much more likely to get a job.
Yeah, I guess that the thing I pushed back on there isn't that the program should be more generic. I totally agree they should. It's that they aren't right now. They are a bad attempt at being generic 30 years ago that has been enforced in the curriculum since. There isn't, in my opinion, at least from the university programs I've been part of, and most of the ones that I've had the pleasure of, like, auditing the, like, class materials and such for, they aren't teaching you generics. They are titling specific units in the class like a generic. Like, I had an assignment in university that was supposed to be about doubly linked lists, Okay. That assignment was about very deep, weird read-write patterns within C++ like file parsing. That like you had to know the very basics of doubly linked lists to use that data and then rewrite it properly. But the vast majority of that assignment had nothing to do with the topic, and I ended up spending 3 days deep in C++ like parsing bullshit. That's how these universities tend to teach, which, to be fair, in the 90s would have been somewhat realistic in the sense that that's somewhat similar to a thing you might be doing on the job, and it's also a way to learn those low-level data structure primitives. But I would argue that both the concept it taught or tried to teach was not super relevant, and the method in which it was taught was entirely bogged down by details that weren't consequential.
Right now.
Sorry.
I forgot to mute. My bad. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, universities are weird. Also, like, every university is going to, like, vary a little bit, at least, in terms of their curriculum, so you never know. Like, I know there's an engineering school called Colorado School of Mines here in Colorado, and it's like, no, they don't learn. You have like two paths. You're either learning like machine vision stuff or computer vision, or you're just learning like very specific, like you're going to go work at like Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or something like that, and you're just learning whatever skills will get you those jobs. So yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I do see Binhong's here. If you're down, I would love to do the discussion on stacked diffs if you're interested. I think that we've went off topic enough that it could be very fun. So yeah, if you're down to hop up and request to speak, then let me know, and I'd love to rant all about the pattern I've never got to use. Yay.
Okay, first.
Hello. Howdy.
Okay,
cool.
so
I'm kind of still working, but it's fine. I'll take a break from work.
Okay. Hold on.
In value of stack diffs. So if you've never done stack diffs before, basically stack diffs is a way where you can break out like a huge commit into like a bunch of smaller commits. But if you use platform like GitHub, it would be like each commit is a PR, and you can't really stack them because you can't do like this PR is dependent on this other PR, which is dependent on this other PR, and then the first PR has to land before the second PR can be merged, etc. That is the idea of a stack diff, is that you can stack them. You can have like 20 different like PR, they are stacked into this whole huge chunk, and then you can get accepted one by one. And then when all of them get accepted, you can just land all 20 of them. Or if like only the first 3 got accepted, you can only land the 3. But if like only the second and the fourth got accepted, you can't land any of them because the first one is not accepted. That's kind of the gist of how like a stack works.
Interesting. So to contrast with so I use Git pick a lot, Git add-p. It's one of my favorite parts of my workflow where I'm breaking my commit into chunks as I commit it. Is it almost like that, but persisted to the actual commit in the code review?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Actually, yes. In a lot of occasion, I do something similar to that as well. And the way it works is I would let's say I would code it like the huge chunk of like the whole feature, right? And there's probably like a lot of code, and I would like break them down into smaller parts, and then I'll split it down into like let's say 5 diffs, and then I'll push 5 diffs at once. And I think the value here is that each diff can be reviewed individually. So in GitHub, it would be like it's like a big PR, and there's like but you can I don't know if you can review commit by commit.
You can do that.
And I think this is like the value here is like you review each commit, and each commit is basically its own, and it doesn't really you don't need all the context to review that commit. You might need some context on what it does, but in most part you can just review the commit on its own,
and then just like, so you have like, let's say you have like 20 commits, like you have 20 diffs, and then you can have like 4 different people each review 5 of them, because that would be way faster than having one person review all 20 of them. Interesting. So at what point would I break things up into these diffs? Would I be doing that while I'm writing the code? Would I be doing that after I've written the code as like a post, like commit pre-PR step? Like what's the workflow for that usually? I would say that's very personal. You could do either of them. I personally do it at the end, like right before I push, simply because it's like easier for me. I want to like test everything works and that stuff. And then at that point, I break it down.
Okay, so now I'll React again.
And do something like what you said about git pick, but we use Mercurial. Damn. Very interesting. Yeah, I do love that it almost feels like an additional primitive on top of something like Git, or in this case Mercurial, where it allows for developers to break things up further as a part of the review flow, but not an artifact in the code itself, where in order to replicate something like this, you'd have to like break up files individually, break up commits very carefully, and make that all part of the workflow at every step. Whereas it sounds like here, once you're done with the code, you can either have been working this way throughout or split it up after the fact, and that allows you to almost like orchestrate your code reviews similar to how you are able to orchestrate the way your code itself is split up, but without having to change your code itself to make the review process better. Because I've definitely found myself splitting up files just to make part of a code review easier. But if I was able to split up the parts of that code review for the same purpose, that sounds like it has a lot of value. Yeah, that's kind of, that's pretty much what I think the big part of it is that a lot of time your code depends on another code, right? Like the first div depends, like the second div depends on the first div, and if you're trying to create a GitHub PR and like your second div depends on the first div, it kind of wouldn't work because the second PR has to like I think the second PR would just have all the code that's in the first PR, and whoever is reviewing it would get like really confused. It's like, oh, you just like push the same changes like twice, but this one has more stuff. Yeah. Interesting.
I just ran into that exact problem. I had a 6 PR chain. I said this PR depends on this PR, and then when that one would have to be reviewed, I was like, this PR depends on this PR. And it was like 6 levels deep. It had to be reviewed and merged in order.
Yep. So like when you do that, you have like that dependency set in the first place. So like the automation would literally just block you from landing because the one that you depend on has not been landed. And this is also part of like the automation thing. So like we have automation stuff. So we technically have 2 like giant mono repo instead of 1. Actually more than 2, but let's just say 2. And we sync certain codes, like for trip types and stuff. We sync them through like across repo. And so you would have the code pushes on this repo, and then the automation like sync them over to the other repo. And this automation would then depend, like it create a div that depends on this other div that has not yet been landed, so that once the other div has landed, this one, it would just land on its own. Interesting. I do like that part, that by chaining these approvals, you're able to collapse a chain of approved code once the lowest dependency there has been approved and merged. Yeah, and actually one other thing. This is like small stuff, but like I don't think people actually use it, but I found it pretty fun, was that you can also add like a huge, like giant dependency graph for your code. And say when you're building a feature and you keep like building new stuff, and you can just like chain the huge thing in like a gigantic like graph or whatever. And so when you send the code to someone, like they were like, oh, how do you build this thing? You'd be like, oh yeah, this is the div.
Stuff that I need
like this is the div stack. That's what we call like this is the div stack. We send it over, and they could just see like from the beginning, like the whole graph, the first div, second div, third div, and then there's like branches, like goes here and there, and then merges somewhere down the line, and that's how this whole feature is built out. I don't think people really do that, but I did that once on one of my projects when I was in Facebook dating, and it was like pretty satisfying. Like it's like 20 div on it. Interesting. I do very much like that part, and I can see how a big system that would almost feel essential.
Okay, there we go.
I haven't left the Git ecosystem mentally, like, ever, which is what's so interesting here, because this is very different from how Git works, and it's challenging my, like, preconceived notions in a way. And
I think that's actually one of the reasons Facebook doesn't use Git, right? Was that I think earlier days when Facebook had scaling issue, they went to the Git community, and Git community just told Facebook, like, you're doing Git wrong.
That does not surprise me. I like Microsoft's approach there and the way they got involved, but at the same time.
Oh yeah, they built the Git VFS to like accommodate Windows, right? It's like I think Windows was like their biggest repo at the time.
Yeah, and they did all the Git LFS stuff to make that reasonable, and it seems to have went pretty well for them. Okay. They also bought GitHub though, so who knows how much of that was out of need versus want.
Yeah, also, I think Microsoft had, I think one of the bigger thing was like Microsoft had like a huge focus on like Windows support because they use a lot of Windows, while before they like basically came in, Git didn't have like, Git's Windows support is like really bad.
Yeah, really bad would be generous. I remember at Twitch when I moved over to the Twitch Studio team, having to set up the Windows machine for dev for the first time. Up until then, I managed to just be on whatever the newest Mac they would give me was, and would often be the like one who got Twitch and Amazon image support early working, because I was willing to work through the bullshit. With Windows, just to get it started like properly with the default stuff, I don't think I ever got commit signing to work properly against the Amazon provided tokens, and I had to do some really weird scripting around every commit to like hijack the commit messages or to hijack the commit command and do all of my signing manually. And that was only working in one of my instances of Git Windows subsystem for Linux, and I couldn't run my code in that same instance because it needed to do C++ and C# bindings in Visual Studio in order to have the Electron app work as expected. So I actually had to run, God, it was such a fucking nightmare. I had to have a separate like terminal running PowerShell for my dev environment for Electron, a separate terminal running this weird instance of WSL for my GitHub and Git stuff, and then another separate instance for the web environment that the Electron shell was actually hosting. I don't remember what that one was in. And this was just to get started. It took me like a week and a half to get my dev environment working, and I'm a very experienced Windows dev that has done stuff on the platform before. It's just rough.
Not surprised. But yeah, I think when Microsoft like acquired, they had like a lot of vested interest in like making Git work.
That checks out. Any chance your mic's like hanging near like your shirt or something? Your audio quality is good, but there's a lot of like random feedback from it.
Okay, yeah, it's probably because of that. Yeah, my mic is hanging on my shirt. I guess not my shirt, but like I'm on a headphone and just like probably hits my shirt.
Way better. Anyways.
But yeah, I think a lot of the companies now are like bigger, and I think it's funny to use the word older, but I think Google started moving to Mercurial as well, internally.
I'm gonna have to render.
Because, yeah, I guess they still use Perforce, but I think they're doing it like in concurrent with like Mercurial at this point. They have like the Mercurial interface now, so they use Mercurial for their like dev interfaces.
Very interesting. I am so relieved that these problems are incredibly far off in my mental model. Like, I will never work for a company that has that much code that you need a bigger, like a different system from Git. And if my company ever gets there, it will have been years after I quit writing code myself. So, God.
Yeah, I think from like 9 99% of the people Git shouldn't be like an issue. But I think there are
why is it saying
like mental model wise, Git and Mercurial work slightly different. Like I wouldn't say slightly, like relatively different. I think Mercurial has like an underlying assumption that you're always connected to the network. That's why it has like a singular trunk, and it doesn't have this like branch idea. Yeah, so you can still like somebody like make some changes, and you can just like fetch their changes into it, and they don't have to like. Do they have to push? I don't think they have to push, which is like weird. You can just like take their comment or something and then just get it. That's breaking my mental model so hard. It's hard to like access even. Yeah, because the idea is like you're constantly connected. So then all the commit you make goes to like this central part, and you can revert it back as long as you make amends, and yeah, stuff like that. And you can like unamend changes.
God, this is so strange to me. I've always lived in the Git decentralized world. I've been so far from alternatives. The thought of a centralized version control where you have to like connect to make changes is like genuinely weirdly scary to me. I have to, yeah.
You can do, I believe you can do it locally. It's just that for the majority of part, you might want to be connected. I think for bigger system, especially like the Facebook and Google ones, because they have like a separate back end, they needed it for, like, they needed it to be centralized. But I think if you just use stock, like stock Mercurial, I don't think you have to do that.
What's the
interesting
source?
I recently
So go ahead.
I had to use Mercurial recently for an Nginx change. Nginx used Mercurial, and I was like, it's open source. I have a change, and nobody has submitted it yet. So I had to learn Mercurial to submit a change. And remember how confusing it was to submit your first PR to Git and like through GitHub, and like the fear, right, that you're gonna mess up and just be shamed from the developer community forever. So that's what I felt again by interacting with Nginx and Mercurial, the community.
Yeah, I was lucky in the sense that I got to learn Git backwards in a way, where I was using it to maintain an instance of a Minecraft server as like a backup version history, as well as like a way to fetch new versions and stuff there. And I got to learn the Git process of like making pull requests through that community, like holding my hand through it, because I had code changes working locally, because I just hacked shit and they wanted them, and they were willing to like teach me how to use Git just to get my changes from me. And I got to learn that flow before I really even understood the basics of code, which was huge once I started writing code, because I was never at any point in my like engineering career scared to do something stupid, because I always knew I could reverse it really quickly.
I learned Git in school actually. I majored in software engineering, and we are like, it was basically a project. We had like multiple semesters where like it was okay, this is your semester long project, do this, and you have to use Git, and you have to like make PRs, and your teammate has to like accept and merge it, and it's all like part of the curriculum. And that's kind of how I learned it, only kind of, because obviously we don't really use it to like its full potential, and we didn't use it great. But I think over time I went to a lot of hackathons, and I had to teach other people how to use Git, and that was like when I learned the most, because then people ask me weird questions. I'm like, actually I don't know, but let me look it up.
Yep. Okay.
I helped run the Rensselaer Center for Open Source at RPI, which was like a big like open source like org at the school. I think it's still the biggest university run open source program. I basically spent the whole time teaching all the kids how to use Git, because nobody knew how yet. It was sad, like having senior like people in their senior year about to go get their first job coming to me, like a freshman, like failing their first set of classes, one of which was bio, funny enough, coming to me asking for help with Git because that was just something they never had learned or been asked to learn because they were only learning how to code in school. They weren't learning how to deliver software, and that always kind of broke my heart. So
it might be because I'm loading it as a module?
Like, actually built writing or making projects into the curriculum.
I've never seen that before. Getting denied
I hope more schools do things like that in the future.
For a script.
Yeah, I already know. I think my curriculum, like my programs, probably one of the like lower ranked program in like Arizona or something. I think I haven't seen a single person from my class in Silicon Valley.
Interesting. I have the same problem where it's like 2 or 3 people in my class, but they're friends I made in the Rensselaer Center for Open Source, and the Arcos people did okay, but pretty much everyone else hasn't. And I'm the only founder in my class, which is kind of sad because we were supposed to be like the world changers, and I, the like weed smoking person who got a music degree and almost dropped out, am somehow the one that's running a company after a successful career at Twitch, and nobody else seems to be able to find their way, and that's a sad reality of how these schools tend to teach.
Okay, I do wonder though how much of like that is the school and how much of that is like you figuring things out, because like I feel like it's both. I think like obviously a school shouldn't just like leave you high and dry. Like you shouldn't be paying somebody to like essentially have them make you figure it out, right, without any help. But also I wonder, like, you've done a lot of work, it seems, from what I hear, in like, like I ran a bunch of like Minecraft stuff, and like that's my like foray into programming, whereas like maybe others haven't exactly been given the opportunity to. And I think like part of that could be on the school in terms of like the school should be giving you this very clear, well-trodden road of like how to go from like beginner to a person who can get a job, right? And you might have like had to taken the beaten path in a way, if that entire statement makes sense.
It sounds like Ben Hong's program actually did that to an extent, though, with the idea of having like projects every couple semesters that you would like from the start to the end of the semester work on, having be filing pull requests, making feature changes, and like building a real project throughout the semester. That's the thing that most university programs are missing, where there's nothing in the program that resembles the work in the real world. And as such, there's like this big wall between the two that is hard to overcome yourself, and the program doesn't even encourage you to try. That's the thing that's missing, in my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, quick one, I guess, maybe a random plug. But I would say, like, not really good job prospect, so maybe don't go for the program. But, so yeah, it's like software engineering in ASU. Like, if you go to computer science in ASU, pretty good job prospect. People actually get, like, hired into, like, big tech and stuff. But not the software engineering program, but, like, my program, we do have stuff like this. Remember, like, junior year, we had a semester-long project where they basically gave us, like, a whole, like, Java repository of, like, the memoranda code. And you're supposed to just make changes to it. You can do whatever. Like, you can fix bugs, you can add new features, like just do whatever to it. Like in group like 3-4 people. And then at the end of the semester you present your changes. And you have to like do everything on GitHub. Okay. That was like one of the projects, and then I think the next semester they also give like an idea and you have to like build it from ground up or something. And the last semester is you either work with a professor on like something their research project need to do, or like you work with some industry partners on like certain projects. But yeah, like I said, like the job prospect wise, if you are a U.S. citizen and you want to live in Arizona, great job prospect. I think I think most of the people that I know from the program like still live in Arizona. They're like software developers. Some works in like the defense industry in Arizona, but I don't think there's anyone other than me that's in Silicon Valley. So interesting. That's just what it is.
Yeah, I will say that at my university there was one class that looked a little like this, where you would sign up for this class. It was mandatory at the time, I think it was called Software Design and Documentation. It was mostly focused on like project planning and like project and product management. Like to an extent, the goal of the class was to help people who had no idea how to code figure out what other parts of the software process existed. And they expected you to use Git and GitHub and a lot of those more standard things, but they did not enforce this in any way and didn't know anything about this stuff either. The professor of the class was like admitted, I think SVN was what he liked, but he didn't really care about what you used. He just wanted to see you come up with an idea and roughly complete it by the end of the semester in some form of prototype. You have to walk out of the first day of the class with a group of 3 other people in that particular unit. Whether or not you like them, you have to find this group, just like the real world, and build it. This class got phased out after my final semester in favor of a class where you learn how Git works via the Elixir, no, it wasn't Git, so it was SVN still, through an Eclipse plugin. And you just complete like pre-assigned tasks again. And that showed to me how far removed my school's like program and like design of curriculum was from the actual real world that the engineers they're letting out would be going into. The closest thing to a real class, which was this ST&D class, got replaced with an Eclipse plugin for an outdated version control system. Yeah, well, that sucks.
Ooh,
there are good universities, though. Definitely worth, like, if you are considering going to university for programming, find some alum, talk to them, see what they learned, see what they didn't. Same with some boot camps. Try to find some alum, talk to them, see what worked and what didn't. Especially if you can find some that did get jobs and some that didn't get jobs and get, like, the contrast in their experience. That can be a really good, like, gauge to figure out what programs are and aren't going to bring you value.
I was going to ask, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I just say, like, I strongly agree. I have people who actually came in and asked me about ASU, and I'm just like, go for the computer science program. Much better job prospect. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, somebody in chat just said that their university didn't have any project courses, but they did have LeetCode style question courses, like a course just for hacking the interview. And that's so painful. That hurt me. I don't have any comment beyond how badly that hurts. Well, on the bright side, y'all are here. If you are here, you are on a very different track than that traditional cracking the coding interview type bullshit. I have not asked anything resembling an algorithm question in so long. All of my employees got hired because they showed me their GitHubs and I liked them. My whole team is assembled of super talented engineers that probably, I can't say for sure because I don't think any of them tried, but I would say the majority of my team would probably fail a traditional FANG interview. And that actually makes them more interesting to me because it means they've put their time and energy into solving these real problems rather than answering these dumb questions on HackerRank.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure if I would go do interviews right now, I would bomb, like, most of them. Like, actually, like, all the technical parts, I would probably fail. And my GitHub is not terribly hot either, because most of my projects are private because I haven't completed them, which I need to change. But it is kind of, like, sad, because I feel like most of the work, or, like, most of my strength is not really in, like, okay, I know how to use a doubly linked list to store stuff in an API, because that, like, never happens. Most of it is, like, my willingness to just, like, stick with a problem for a long time and somehow keep my head clear enough to solve it, and then also, like, just being able to, like, figure out what questions I need to ask. And I think that's something every developer learns, like, over time, right? And then, like, I've gotten a lot better at, like, the way that I format my code and stuff like that, but I really don't feel like, I understand why coding interviews exist, right? Like, most of the time it's just to weed out people because the big companies need a way to do that. But it's kind of sad where it's like smaller companies are like, oh, hey, do you want to work at like no-name company X in some state, right? Like, go through an interview that is literally as hard as getting into Google to get a job. And even like some of the junior roles are like increasingly harder to get into, which doesn't make any sense because if you're hiring a junior, your goal is to like train them a little bit, right? Your goal is to like train them into somebody that can become proficient enough and then start like promoting them and stuff like that. Like the entire point is that you have like some people that are like you can pay a little bit less and then understand that like you're going to have your senior devs train them and then they'll get skilled enough that you can like slowly give them more and more raises. Like I don't know, that's weird.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts here. The original goal of that style of interview was meant to be to give you a problem you couldn't solve, to see how your like debugging process and communication worked. So you would ask questions and like discuss what the struggles are in a meaningful way. I think that we've lost that in the sauce of having like super elite questions that you know the answer to ahead of time, and the expectation has shifted as a result to we give you this hard problem and how quickly you solve it is whether or not we hire you. Something I would index on in my interviews was finding the like how deep do I have to go before you'll say I don't know that, and how willing are you to learn it during the interview. So like one of my favorite examples of this was one of my interviews asking a developer to do, it was my usual Pokédex question where they make like a basic Pokédex with provided data. And during it, they were using class components, and I asked if they played with hooks much yet. Hooks, I think they've been out for like 6 months or so at this point. And they said no, but they were really excited about it. We're hoping to get to it soon. And I asked if they were down to, as part of the interview, just try learning hooks with me, like on the fly. And that was the easiest hire I ever made because they asked really good questions. They used hooks incorrectly the first 2 times, and with a tiny bit of guidance, not only applied it correctly, but when I did a harder question after, applied it correctly there as well, and also asked good questions throughout this whole process. I hired them because they didn't know, but they didn't know good. And your ability to not know things well is what you should be hired for as a junior, and it pisses me off immensely that is not how it's being treated. That's just the way the industry hires more often than not, and it's dumb. The funniest part to me about all this HackerRank shit is that the point at which I became an objectively good hire and the point at which I became objectively good at doing those problems are like 3 years removed and have nothing to do with each other. I got my job at Twitch because I was lucky, I'm talkative, and the hiring managers really liked me. I should not have gotten that job. I wasn't qualified enough for a full-time, so they actually gave me a contract and extended it because by the end of it, they still weren't confident. So I really had to prove myself to keep my job at Twitch. From there, I did really well there, kicked ass and all, but man, I got lucky at that point. For the next year or 2, I grinded hard, and by the end of it, was pretty solid engineer, like could and would have gotten the job anywhere else I wanted without too much struggle. The funny part there was I still sucked at those HackerRank problems to an extent, and those types of companies would have not been a great time for me. But then I got really into the advent of code, which is a code contest that runs every December from December 1st to Christmas, where at 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST, a new code problem comes out. It's like a dumb Christmas-themed kind of HackerRanky thing. The first part is usually like conceptually kind of simple. And once you submit an answer, it reveals part 2, which is an extension and a more difficult such extension of that first problem in one random aspect. So maybe the first problem is like, you have a 2D grid, there's trees in it randomly, help Santa navigate in the fewest steps possible to this particular coordinate. Part 2 might be, oh, it's actually 3-dimensional, here's the other coordinate grid, good luck. And depending on how you wrote your solution to the first problem, the second one will either be very easy or very difficult. And that made me much better at that workflow of not just like solving a hard technical problem with minimal code, but in an extensible way. So if I got a harder extension to it, I'd be able to handle that. And I got really competitive at Advent of Code, so I'm just a competitive person. And after like doing that every year, 2 years in a row, I ended up realizing, oh, I could destroy any interview now. And then for fun, went and did a few and crushed them because I had been doing this dumb side game that was distracting me from my work. If I had been a better employee during that time and continued focusing on the product we were delivering, I would have done worse in HackerRank stuff. I would have done worse in the advent of code. I would have done worse in those interviews, funny enough. But I only got good at those interviews because of this dumb contest that I wanted to do for fun. And that's the funniest part to me is the thing that made me good at interviews and the thing that made me good as an employee couldn't be less related. If anything, they're inversely related.
In a way, it's like... Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Quick one. I just want to say I don't know. I think I don't have a lot of I don't do leak code, and I haven't had a lot of this, but mainly because I didn't even get a lot of interviews in the first place. Back when I first graduated, people were just like, "Oh, your GPA suck. We're not gonna interview you." And that was like the end of the story. So I have very limited the chances of interview anyway. So I don't really have a good idea of which interview systems suck and which doesn't. But yeah.
The problem there is almost all of them are very team-based. If you're doing university recruiting, there will probably be 1 or 2 recruiters that have a very specific system for that university. But beyond that, once you're doing on-sites and actual technical interviews with whiteboards and such, those are super instance and team specific, depending on the company, of course. But at Twitch, if you interviewed at any other team, you would have a very different experience than if you interviewed on one of my teams. I ran my interviews differently. I chose to diverge from the recommended template because it wasn't enforced, it was just recommendations. And every team is run slightly differently, and as such, especially at an Amazon, a Twitch, or even a Facebook, from what I know how they're structured to an extent, you're interviewing with the people you're going to be working with, and the way they structure that interview can tell you a lot.
I think for university grad, not really. I think Facebook and Google has a central hiring pipeline, so you do get, I guess, more standard interviewing style. But I know Apple has very, 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 very team centric. We had one social, I remember, when I first joined, when I was first joined Apple or something, and we were talking about our interview experience, and everybody just came in different. One person had to come in do some presentation, and they use PowerPoint, and they were just yeah, we almost reject you because you didn't use most was the Apple version of it, I remember. But yeah, because they use PowerPoint. Oh yeah, they didn't use Keynote, the PowerPoint. But stuff like that. That was pretty funny. But yeah, everybody had very, very different interview questions. Well, I think Facebook and Google, I know Facebook, they're mostly the same, except if you're interviewing for specifics, if you're interviewing for Android, Eng, iOS, Eng, or UIE, or PE, then it's separate. But if you're just interviewing for generalist software engineer, you get the generalist software engineer interview.
I knew that was the case for a lot of intern pipelines. I was under the impression that most core hiring pipelines were much more team specific, depending on the company, of course. But I know that's the case at Amazon and Twitch, at least. The intern interview process is a little more generic. But once even for interns at Twitch, once you've got through that base pipe of they seem like they'd be a decent intern, then you start interviewing with the specific team. And I can't imagine being a hiring manager for a team at a company, having that team bring on a person that they didn't interview. That sounds like a nightmare on so many levels that I don't want to partake in.
So this is an interesting take because Facebook. So I would say the majority of new hires at Facebook are general pipeline. So yes, the hiring manager did not interview them, but it doesn't really stop hiring managers from going after them. And we actually have an internal rule against second interview. So teams can't give you an interview to join their team. You have I guess you can say you don't fit, but you can't be okay, do this thing, and if you complete it, I'll let you join, kind of stuff. This qualifies as a second interview, and it's very against the hiring internally. So yeah. Sorry if you keep chipping in. I think Christian has stuff to say.
So it's very interesting.
No.
Christian,
You're all good. I talk a lot, and I also ramble and take things in weird directions. So don't worry about it. I was gonna say, I think the general hiring thing is okay because you're at such a massive company. Like when you're at Facebook or Google, like let's say Facebook hires through a pipeline, like Facebook has so many teams you can join, you're probably going to find a good fit. So it's easier for Facebook to just be like, you know what, let's just throw these people into our pipeline and then we'll just like use our HR managers to find them a good fit anyway. And then if you ever have employees that want to like move around from team to team, you just have like one process of doing like employee moving too. So like, you know, you have an employee that joins a company, then they can get like interviewed and then hired onto a team. And then you have an employee that like wants to move around in teams. It's basically the same process. So it wouldn't necessarily be that difficult for a company that big.
Yeah, I think this is where I have a ton of pushback, actually.
Okay.
I think what you set up there is a system that hides a lot of really bad problems. The one that I see a lot is if there was a team that was terrible and they need people on this team, like they're always hiring, people join and they leave, either they go to another team or they quit, that team is going to have a disproportionately high number of recent grad new hires joining the team. This is going to be an unbalanced entry point for new people to the company. As a result, the majority of new hires are going to be teams that are going to be on teams that have had recent departures, which just by definition are teams that are less stable and less like good of an experience to be on. And as such, you have almost like by design engineered out the possibility of high quality experience for the majority case, because the people you're hiring are always going to be on the teams with the most recent departures.
Slight disagree there. There are a few things to consider. It's like one is each of the headcount are different levels, and managers usually won't like down level their headcounts. If they get like an L5, it's because they need an L5 on the team. And I think that's also one of the reasons why managers actually is heavily incentivized to like get you to promotion, is because it's harder to get a next level headcount and it's easier to get somebody to promote to the next level so that they can handle next level capacity. But like to your point, that would be like a huge red flag for like the manager if like this team keeps losing people, and all they can do is like get new hires, and like everybody in the team is new to the company. That would be like a major red flag, and it would show up in their PSC, I would say.
I would say this goes into like a higher level with if you're also encouraging internal transfer though. Like let's say I hire Christian, and my team is trash and just terrible culture. We're really mean to everybody. We swear in our code reviews and such, and Christian just hates it. You have a much cooler culture team, Ben, and this is known around the company that Ben's team kicks ass. It's the one everybody wants to be on. You have a brand new L6 opening out of nowhere. Christian's at L6 on my team. He sees that, and before you even go public with that listing, he hops in. Now I, the hiring manager on my shit team, shrug and realize, oh, I lost another one. Guess we have to hire more. Go hire somebody else in. And instead of you, Ben, bringing in some new talent on a team that has like a high bar for quality, but also a good experience for those engineers, you're not bringing in new talent. You're not the exposure to the company for a new hire. It is statistically more likely that good roles will be filled by internal people. And as a result, you are opening roles on worse teams.
Yeah, and I can kind of see this too, because I feel like unfortunately, like one of the way that the system that we're describing the only way that it could work well is if you have people that are aware of like, oh, this metric means that people don't like this team and we need to have some sort of internal process to do this. The unfortunate thing is I feel like for like most companies, like you're not going to have that awareness, and then it's really going to get like Theo said, like probably swept under the rug, just because like so many people want to work at Facebook anyway, right? Like I guess I could take like the counter to the position I just said earlier. It's like so many people want to work at Facebook that it's like, okay, well, we just lost another person, you know, let's take a person from the literally thousands of people who want to work at Facebook, hire them, put them on the team, you know, they're decent, maybe they'll swallow it and not complain because they're at Facebook, it's their dream job. If they complain and want to move teams, then, we'll just move them, right? So it could get, very complacent very quickly just because, Facebook can just hire and they don't have to worry about it. And they don't need to be worried about, quality, really, unless there's, a massive problem.
I guess this is kind of more like a culture thing. I'll add a little bit more context was that we have pulse results, and this is a bit weird, but basically pulse is an anonymous questionnaire that goes out every half, and apparently this is one of the things that are held. And I know this because there is a manager who directly told me about this, was that direct managers are held heavily accountable to pulse results, while higher management probably aren't. I don't know, but I know direct managers, so the first level managers, are heavily held liable for if people were just this team has shit work-life balance, or this team the code in this team is shit, stuff like that. It would reflect heavily in the PS. While I don't know, I think people have complained about reorg and stuff and never seem to have anything happen to that. So I think there are some sentiments does it reflect on the higher level managers? But I do know specifically first line managers would get hit if the pulse results are really bad to the team.
Twitch had a similar yearly survey thing, but by the time the results came in, we were usually 1 to 2 reorgs deep since the survey went out, and as a result, none of the feedback applies anymore, so nothing ever happens.
We have the regular pulse, which happens I believe every half, and then we also have micro pulse. I don't know what happens to those micro pulse, but they happen. I don't know. I would just casually work, and then someday just this little bot would come ask me, "Hey, is it a good time for a micro pulse?" And then just send me a link.
That's actually nice. We had something kind of like that at Twitch 15.5, and I swear I was the only person there who actually liked it, so they got rid of it, and I was really sad. And yeah, they never replaced that with an easy, low-touch, how are things going, how you feeling type thing. I think it's important, even just personally, to document your own, what have I worked on recently, what stood out to me over this last week, what went well, what went poorly, what can I work on, what are my goals, just having that notated somewhere every week or two is so high value, and it'll always blow me away how many people did not like that part of the job.
Oh, and one thing, so Pulse is such an interesting thing on Facebook, where basically with managers, not direct managers, but usually org level, directors and stuff, they would, or VPs, they would commit to do certain things if they get 100% Pulse. Because apparently some people don't fill them out. But there has had some interesting, I think you would get managers cosplay as Jigglypuff or something if they get 100% Pulse for filling out parts of it. It's a pretty interesting one.
Interesting. I like that they gamified it slightly. Since we have a bunch more people joining, I want to make it clear if anybody wants to hop up, ask questions, shitpost, talk about all web dev, even not necessarily web dev related things, feel free to hop up, request to speak, and I'll get you up. I did just see a question come from the audience, from Ariel in particular. The question, I'll just make sure I get the wording right. Do I have any tips or suggestions for how to become a senior developer? I'm assuming that this is in terms of how do you progress from a junior role to a more senior role in your career? I have lots of opinions on this, and if there's other people who do as well, feel free to hop up and share. But to start from my experience, I found that there's a lot of ways to become senior. Generally speaking, the best way is to be hired into a senior role for qualifications you got in your current role. That's the only surefire way, from my experience, to really get a promotion, is to team hop or company hop into one. Everything else has a lot more gotchas and bullshit that you have to work around at the vast majority of companies. One of the things I've noticed about most promotion culture is it tends to be less about how large an amount of good you've done. It's, have you hit a certain bar for good, and have you avoided any bad that might come up in this process too? So if you had a person who's done 100 good things and one thing someone didn't like, and you have another person who's done 10 good things and nothing nobody didn't like, or nothing anybody didn't like. The person who did 10 good things gets the promotion. The person who did 100 good things gets a write-up or some kind of like bad review because somebody was salty about that one other thing. And that means within most culture, a lot of getting promoted at a current or in a current role is just reading the culture and figuring out who else there has gotten a promotion, what that process looked like, how much time they spend writing docs, how much time did they spend closing tickets, how much time did they spend like planning out the promotion ahead of time. I know I had to spend like a year and a half writing my promo doc at Twitch just for it to get delayed twice for incredibly dumb reasons I'm excited to talk about in the future. But yeah, a lot of this is very culture dependent, and as such, the advice I keep leaning back to is the best way to get a promotion is to get a better role and to figure out why, when you interview for senior roles, you're not getting the job there, and index on that. That'll be a quick way to get a good signal. I do see Ben Hong has his hand up. I'm sure he has way better opinions than I do here.
So first of all, like senior at different company kind of mean different things. But I'll just talk about like in general, like promotion side of things. I think first of all, like promotion in a lot of occasions, like a very deliberate
I'm not
thing.
typing anything.
You have to like talk to your manager and be like, okay, I want the promotion this half, and then plan for the promotion, because then get job, you get scope, you get the kind of impact that would give you the promotion. And this is like a durable, like in 99%.
If you guys have any questions, by the way, feel free to throw them in the chat.
And usually it's more
I
like
do not mind explaining anything that I'm doing.
Like if you're going from IC3 to IC4, that you just promote because like, oh, like you did your work really well.
Hold on. I'll be right back.
Majority of occasions, like when you promote, just because you plan for it and you hit the target. And then I think
much better.
In line with what Theo said earlier was that this is something that took me a while to grasp, was that in a lot of companies you have to like say there are ratings, right? So like Facebook, there's like meet most, meet all, exceed, and then like greatly exceed, redefine, whatever, all the stuff. There are 4 axes of impact. There are 4 axes that you need to hit in like PSC. So like there's like impact, there's people, there's better engineering, and there's like directions. And the idea behind this is you have to. So the idea of like if you want to get like an exceed, you want to get a greatly exceed. First, you have to at least meet all in all 4 of these axes. If say you're really good at impact, you're really good at direction, but you're really bad at better engineering, you still get meet most, even though like I don't know if you count like you get a value or something.
I know I'm not supposed to use this like this. Oh, actually, hold on.
You have to like have the bare minimum for all
should
4
be able
of them,
to do this,
and then
right?
you
Or
exceed
is
the
it still gonna be
expectation on like
immutable?
some of them, so you can make the case that you actually exceeded expectation. And this is the same for
That's right.
like a promotion packet. Like when you go for promotion, you have to ensure that in all different ways you're already performing at the next level. Then just like, oh, this one part I did like 75% of the work of a senior, and like for this 75% I did like way better than a regular senior, and for this 25% of the senior work I did slightly worse. You would still not get the promotion because this 25% matter, and that's kind of how like promo or like performance review usually goes for a lot of these cases. So
that's a very important point. That a lot of it is, since there's that spectrum of different things, that you're at different levels. If you're hiring somebody in, the expectation is that they're like within 50% plus or minus of every one of those categories. But the minus is okay as long as it's only 1 or 2. Where you're being hired in, or where you're being like promoted up to that role, the expectation is you exceed every one of those bars, which is really dumb when some of those bars are not necessarily consistently one axis when you go from one level to another. A problem I had at Twitch doing my senior promo is in a couple of categories I was at a principal level to an extent, and a lot of the like things that I was expected to do as a senior were delivering very like technically like detailed reports on a lower level to help like the junior engineers like know what they were working on. But our team first off didn't have enough juniors for that to be a good use of my time, and more importantly, I was spending my time at like the higher level making sure our entire front-end infrastructure didn't collapse under the weight of the changes the creator org as well as other orgs were making. And my time was much more looking over other people's big proposals and poking holes and sinking them and making sure that our approach as like a group was correct. And as such, I was dinged in my performance reviews or not even my performance reviews. In my performance reviews, I kicked ass, but in my promo reviews, they didn't give me like a positive rating in this category because I wasn't performing at a senior level. I was performing at a principal level, which was just mind-bogglingly stupid to me. And still am pissed about how a lot of that was structured at Twitch. So know that as a result, almost all of my takes around promotion and like career growth are going to be very biased and largely against whatever your current employer is. Absolutely do the stuff Ben said, in particular, like bring this up with your manager, figure out what a promotion plan looks like. If they say they don't think you're ready, say, cool, let's do it, figure out why I'm not ready then. Be on a promotion track at all times in as formal of a way as you can. And then when you fail it, because some bullshit happened that you have no control of, interview at another team at the company, or better, another company, and get the promotion you deserve, because now you know whether or not you do.
Yeah, like, I think like I mentioned earlier, in a lot of occasions, your manager are usually incentivized to help you in a lot of occasions. Or if you work at a company that do stack ranking, and like they fire like one of the people or something, then yeah, the system stops. But in most occasions, because for managers, it's harder to get a headcount for the next level, and easier to get a headcount for your level, and just get you promoted to the next level and give you the work for of the next level scope. It makes more sense that they want to like help you get promoted so that they can like take on like bigger stuff, like bigger project, essentially.
Sometimes headcount allocation is against like current team architecture, so if you promote somebody at like specific times, it can actually negatively affect the headcount that you're assigned for the coming year. And depending on how the company structures its promotion cycles, it might be intentionally aligned to discourage big promotions before big team expansions. And I ran into that a lot too, where I would switch teams eager because they promised a better promotion track. I joined the team because they were hiring a bunch to fill up quickly, and now that the team's filled up, they're actually scared of their head count getting trimmed at any point, and now they're actually scared to promote me because a promotion would also be an increase of head count, because the total like pool of money allocated to pay each engineer has increased by promoting me, and they're already over allocated. It can actually raise the likelihood as a manager that your team gets broken up or trimmed if you're in the middle of crazy reorg shit. So I've been on teams that overhired and then like anchored me in place, because if I go too far in any direction, it hurts that. Like if I leave the team, they can't hire in more because their headcount will be trimmed because they've over provisioned, and they can't promote me because they're over provisioned as well. So now they're doing everything they can to keep you from leaving, but at the same time keep you from growing. And I've seen that be like engineered into the promotion structures of companies at times. I have so much bullshit I'm talking around to the best of my ability right now. God, that January 31st cannot come soon enough. I see a bunch of familiar faces have joined. Feel free to hop up and request if anybody wants to chat, especially if you want to talk about the current hot topic of promotion and like company leveling structures. I think most of this stuff sucks, and if you have opinions on it, please feel free to jump in and share them. Also, for those who have recently joined, we're also cross-streaming on Twitch. If you go to twitch.tv/Theo, I put way too much effort into building a system where I can cross-stream a Twitter space on Twitch with decent audio on both somehow. So, yeah.
I gotta pay attention to what I say. It's on Twitch.
Yeah, should have mentioned that before. My bad.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I do plan on making the next couple of these more formal. This is the last very hangouty Web Dev Wednesday for a bit. I have an exciting... I can announce next week's for sure. Next week we're going to be having one of the recent hires at T3 Tools. Bryn will be joining us. We'll possibly even be pairing on some code during it, which will be fun to show off like our code base and how the T3 stack works at scale. So that'll be really fun. The week after that, it looks like we're going to have somebody from Vercel, a recent DevRel and advocate that they hired my friend Hassan, who has been kicking butt. He ran the Discord during the Vercel Next.js conference and has been a huge member of the community since. So really excited to have them on for the next 2 shows. Yeah, oh, dang, it's actually getting very close to 5. I hate to start wrapping things up as the audience is ever growing, but I'll probably go till 5:15 or so. As such, I'm going to open this up for a final round of Q&A. If anybody wants to take advantage of the panel of more senior engineers we have up here, ask questions about development, like technical infrastructure, making a startup. We got all sorts of people here with a variety of experience, so feel free to request to speak.
You can also ask about apprenticeships or testing. I can answer those questions.
And I'll have different answers to the testing questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just want to say they need more different Reacts. I need to be able to say angry or wow kind of stuff.
Absolutely agree. I would benefit greatly from a few more. If I could just do any emoji, it would be dangerous what I would do, but I would do things with that for sure.
Yeah, only thing can do here is rock, paper, scissors, which is super boring, but yeah.
Happy that the community's managed to make some form of game out of it. Yo, Kevin, what's good, man? Feel free to hop up if you want to speak. Yo, Lucy, what's good?
Okay, thank you for letting me speak. It is nearly 1 o'clock in the morning from where I am. I'm just coding some algorithms. So on the topic of algorithms, as this is the recent topic I'm doing in website development or coding in general,
I'm going to start wrapping up my stream
here.
here. Thanks to the people. I don't know if anybody's watching right now, actually, but if you are, thanks for watching.
Algo Expert, and
I need to get out of here. I'll make the stream a little bit better next time, I promise. I promise. It's going to be better. I promise you.
You to use it is a waste of money.
See you all
if they're choosing to spend their money to